My name is Megan Thompson. I'm 31 years old, and I'm an ER nurse, which means I thought I'd seen every way a person can hurt someone they love. Then I woke up from emergency surgery and found out my mom had uploaded photos of me unconscious, hooked to an IV. To her 80,000 followers, before anyone had even told me whether I was okay, she captioned my worst night with a candle emoji and a discount code. My family called it grieving. I called it what it was. I walked out of her life for good. But here's the part nobody saw coming. 2 years later, my mother stood on my doorstep with no makeup and no camera, begging me to come home, swearing she had become different. I didn't believe her. I didn't slam the door either. Instead, I wrote a list on a page from my nursing notebook and slid it across a diner table. What was on that list, and what she did when she reached the last line, is the reason my family looks the way it does today. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where silent people finally say the things families don't want to hear. If you've ever had to protect your peace from someone who calls it abandonment, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. To explain the list, I have to take you back to Neatville, Illinois, to a yellow house with a porch swing that nobody was allowed to sit on until it had been photographed. I was 8 when my mom, Colleen, a preschool teacher with a good camera and a better smile, started a blog called The Bright Side House. It began innocently enough. Castles, craft tables, me and a pumpkin patch. Then the follower count started climbing, and our home silently turned into a set. Breakfast got cold while she found the light. I had a real outfit and a shooting outfit, and I learned the difference before I learned cursive. Other kids had chores. I had reshoots. My mother directed our family the way some women garden, constantly, lovingly with shears. Smile bigger, say it again but happier. One more, sweetie, just one more. My dad, Gary, was an electrician who came home from actual work and picked up a camera for the unpaid kind. He built her a ring light stand before you could buy them in stores. I want to be fair here because fair matters to me. There was money in it eventually, real money, and it paid for braces and summer camp and the porch swing itself. My mother wasn't hiding in a bottle or going to a casino. She was right there every single day, pointing a lens at us and calling it love. For a long time, I believed her the way you believe the weather. Then I turned 13 and she published an upload that followed me down every hallway of my middle school for an entire year. I need a breath before I tell you what it was. The upload was titled Megan's First Period, a bright side guide to raising confident girls. There was a photo of me on our bathroom floor crying, taken through the doorway I hadn't thought to close. She wrote about my cramps. She tagged a heating pad brand. It performed, as she liked to say, beautifully. The 8th grade performed too. Boys left pads on my desk for months. A teacher pulled me aside to say how brave I was, and I wanted to slide between the floor tiles and stay there. Here's what I want you to realize because it matters later. I did not go silently. I was 13 and I fought. I tore down the curtain she used as a backdrop in my bedroom. At 16, I refused to film a back-to-school haul, sat on the stairs with my arms crossed, while the sponsored backpacks waited in their plastic. My mother didn't yell. She did something more effective. She got silent and hurt and said, "That camera paid for your braces, Megan. It paid for this house. You'd take food off our table over a little embarrassment. Guilt is a leash that fits a teenager perfectly." My dad would sometimes take a frame off the wall if I begged, but he never once unplugged the camera. And the year I turned 14, my mother brought home a new baby and a new material calendar in the same week. My sister Avery is a fresh face for the brand. I held that little pink bundle in the hospital lobby, away from the lens, and I made her a promise I had no power to keep. I promised she would never be the star. It's the only promise leaving ever made me break. At 24, I moved out for good, 45 minutes away to Chicago into an apartment the size of my mother's pantry. And I loved it the way you love oxygen. I put myself through nursing school on night shifts and loans. And I set one boundary clearly in words a preschool teacher could not misrealize. No photos of me ever again. Not tagged, not cropped, not in the background. She agreed with the wounded grace of a woman granting a strange favor. Mostly she kept it if you don't count the throwback uploads. Old footage of little me she recycled every anniversary because, as she explained, that material already existed. I let it go. You pick your battles, and I was tired. I met Nate around then, a field engineer with calm hands and no idea who the Brightside house was, which might be the most attractive thing about him. He learned quickly enough. He also learned that I kept him 3 steps back from my family. And though it took me years to see it, 3 steps back from me. I had gotten so good at not being seen that I did it even with the lights off and the door locked. Privacy was my native language by then. So when I found out at 29 that I was pregnant, I told exactly one person that. And I hugged that secret to my chest like a hot water bottle. 11 weeks of something that was entirely gloriously new. No caption, no followers, just a due date in June, and a man who kept resting his hand on my stomach during commercials. Then, on a Tuesday night shift under the fluorescent lights, I worked beneath something inside me tore. I knew the pain was wrong before I could name it, the way you know a smoke alarm from an oven timer. I was 6 hours into my shift when it folded me over a supply cart. My friend Dana took one look at my face and got me on a gurney in the department where I worked. Ectopic pregnancy rupture. The baby had implanted in the wrong place. And there is no version of that story where the baby is okay. And if you wait too long, there's no version where the mother is either. They ran me to surgery under lights I had stood beside 100 times. Nate was 30,000 feet over Texas with his phone off. Flying to a job site unreachable in the 1 hour of his life I needed him to land. So the hospital did what hospitals do. They went down the emergency contact list, and the second name on it was my mother. Colleen arrived within the hour, and I will tell you the truth. Some animal part of me was glad. She was let in as next of kin while I was in recovery. Still under, still gone. I woke up at 4 in the morning to a kind nurse with tired eyes, telling me I had lost the pregnancy in one fallopian tube, and that I was going to be fine, a word we use in medicine like a bandage. I remember nodding. I remember asking for water. And I remember the way the aide by the door looked at me a little too long, a little too soft, before her eyes flicked away like she'd been caught. My phone sat on the bedside tray. When I turned it over, the screen was a wall of notifications that would not stop scrolling, 200 of them, all tagging me in my mother's newest upload. The photo was taken from the foot of my recovery bed. I was unconscious, grey as dishwater, an IV in my arm and a tube under my nose, my gown slipping off one shoulder. My mother had gotten the lighting right, she always did. The caption began, "Our family is walking through an unthinkable loss tonight." It went on, she named the pregnancy I had told no one about. She wrote, "Hug your babies tonight with a little dove." And then, because sorrow apparently pairs with retail, she linked a sorrow journal from her affiliate shop and a discount code for a candle company, Brightside 15. If you're curious. The upload was already the highest performing thing on her page in over a year. The comments were a wall of praying hands from strangers who knew my baby existed before Nate's plane touched the ground. He found out his child was gone from a phone notification in a rental car, from his mother-in-law's shopping page, before I could reach him. My co-workers had seen me like that. People I hand instruments to have seen me like that. While I lay there scrolling, the door opened and my mother came in carrying gas station flowers and glowing like a woman coming home from a good church service. "And honey," she said, "the response has been incredible. People need to see this." "You're helping so many women," I asked her very silently, because silent was all I had to take it down. She patted my leg through the blanket and told me I would realize when the numbness wore off. What she actually said next, standing in front of my IV pole with her phone still in her hand, told me everything I needed to know about who my mother had always been. She said no, not a cruel no, which almost would have been easier. A reasonable managerial note was delivered in her explaining to the sponsor's voice. "Sweetheart, it's already reached 90,000 people. If I delete it now, it looks like we're hiding something. There's a narrative to consider." A narrative? I was 14 hours out of emergency surgery, minus one fallopian tube and one future, and my mother was workshopping optics at the foot of my bed. When I said the words private in mine, she flinched like I'd used profanity, then went straight to the wound. "So, I'm not allowed to grieve for my own grandchild," she said, dabbing at dry eyes. "You're punishing me for loving too loud." My dad hovered in the doorway, holding her camera bag, studying the floor tile like it owed him money, and said nothing at all. And then I saw movement behind him. Avery, 15 years old, in the hallway of a hospital at 7 in the morning on a school day, holding her phone up sideways, filming through the little window. Our eyes met over the top of it, and she went pale and lowered it and mouthed. Mom said to get footage of you two making up for the vlog. She looked like she wanted to dissolve. It wasn't her fault. She was a kid following the only house rules she'd ever known. But something in my chest went very still and very cold, like a monitor flatlining into one clean tone. My mother hadn't broken the rules of our family. I finally understood that she was the rules. There was no version of me awake or under anesthesia, whole or bleeding, that she would not sell. I was discharged on a Thursday. I went back to my apartment in Chicago and I did not make a scene because scenes were her currency and I was done paying in it. I blocked her number, her accounts, her email. I sent one text before the wall went up. Until you realize what you took from me, don't call. Then I turned off my phone and slept for 11 hours next to a man who kept one hand on my shoulder all night. My mother responded the only way she knew how. Within a week, there was a video 9 minutes long filmed in good light. My daughter left me while I was grieving. It was called. She cried on camera the way she did everything on camera beautifully. People need to see what arrangement does to a mother. The caption said, "The internet saw." Strangers found my work profile and flooded it with 1-star reviews calling me a heartless nurse. Someone mailed a sympathy card to my apartment, addressed to the daughter who abandoned her grieving mom. My Aunt Deb called and led with, "She's your mother, Megan. Family comes first," and could not tell me a single fact about my surgery. My father never called at all, which was its own kind of information. Here's the arithmetic nobody warns you about. She took my privacy, and when I objected, the family bill came to me. I lost my mother, my father, my sister down the hall of that yellow house. And the right to tell my own story all in 1 month. And the story wasn't even done charging me. But I had a locked door, a silent man, and a job where I was useful. For 2 years, that was the whole story. Then on a grey Tuesday in October, my doorbell rang. Let me compress the 2 years, because recovery is boring to watch and expensive to live. I found a therapist named Carol, who kept tissues she never pushed toward me. I worked. I got very good at trauma cases. The way you get good at anything you'd rather not realize from the inside. Nate proposed on an ordinary Sunday with the ring in his jacket, like he'd been carrying it for months, because he had. I said not yet. He asked if it was him. I said no, and that was true, and I could not explain 1 inch further, and that was the problem. He knew the events of that night at the hospital. He did not know the weather. The name I had picked out and never said aloud, the way I still counted forward to June sometimes. I'd hidden it even from him, filed under safe. Carol had a theory that I'd stopped letting anyone see me at all, that I was running a museum after hours, lights off, alarms on. I told her that it was very poetic and different from the subject, and I watched my mother's channel the whole time. I'm not proud of it. I made an account with no name and no photo, and I checked the Brightside house like you'd check the weather in a country you fled. What I saw was my sister. Avery was 17 now, and she was the brand. Raising Avery, the series was called. Her driving test, her dress shopping, her acne routine, scheduled and sponsored and captioned in my mother's voice. Then one video kept me up until 3 in the morning, and it wasn't because my sister was smiling in it. It was because she wasn't, and the camera kept rolling. Anyway, the video was called Avery's First Heartbreak, How Our Family Copes. Some boy had ended things with my little sister over text the way boys do, and within a day, my mother had filmed her swollen eyes at the kitchen island, a mug of cocoa placed in frame like a prop, because it was a prop. Avery kept glancing off camera, asking with her eyes if she was done yet. She was not done yet. The video ran 9 minutes and outperformed everything on the channel that month. Over 1 million views of my sister's worst week, sponsored naturally by a tea brand. I watched it twice and threw up the second time. Then I did what I could do from behind a blocked number and a burner account. I got a message to Avery through her best friend's older sister, a phone number with no name attached. She called on a Saturday, whispering from her closet, and what I heard in 20 minutes rearranged me. She loved the comments and hated the camera. She could not always tell the difference between being loved and being watched, because nobody had ever shown her one without the other. She didn't know what a life off camera even looked like. The way you can't miss a country you've never visited. I said, "Come stay with me anytime, no phones." And she laughed like I'd offered her a weekend on the moon. That same week on a night shift, I read about a law our state had just passed about kids in monetized videos. Money owed into trust. Records parents had to keep. I read it twice and saved it silently. The way you pocket a key to a door you hope you'll never need. If you've ever watched somebody you love get used and felt that specific helpless anger, you know why I couldn't look away. So tell me in the comments honestly. Would you have gone back for your sister or stayed gone? Subscribe, because what happened next? I still have trouble believing. The internet turned around and did to my mother exactly what she had taught it to do to us. It started as these things do now with somebody else's grown child. A former blog kid, a young woman a few years behind me in the same strange industry, uploaded an essay about growing up as material. It went everywhere. Suddenly, there were news segments about family vloggers and a hashtag and lists. The Brightside house made the lists. Somebody dug up the hospital upload about me, screenshotted the candle code beside my unconscious face, and it travelled further in a weekend than my mother's apology tour ever would. Her biggest sponsor paused the partnership by Monday. The algorithm, which had loved her for 2 decades, dropped her like a hot pan. Snorts, she uploaded an apology video, 4 minutes, reading from her phone. The phrase, "I'm sorry if you were hurt," doing its usual heavy lifting, and the internet, which can smell a performance faster than any daughter, laughed at her. The channel went into free fall. And here's the part I want to be honest about, because this story is useless if I'm not. I did not enjoy it. I had imagined some version of this for years, and when it came, it tasted like nothing. Every viral upload dunking on my mother had my unconscious face in it, or Avery's swollen eyes. The internet wasn't defending us, it was just changing channels. Their outrage was material too, and my family was still the raw material. And I understood then, bone deep, that whatever I did about my mother, I could never do without her. Not my arena, never was. 3 weeks after her last sponsor walked away on that grey Tuesday in October, my doorbell rang and I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped through the floor. My mother stood in my hallway, looking like a woman I had never met, wearing my mother's face. No makeup, grey showing at her part, an inch of honesty. She'd have died before showing any followers. A cardigan I recognised from before the blog, before everything peeled at the elbows. She did not have her phone in her hand. I noticed it the way you notice a soldier without his rifle. I opened the door the width of my forearm. She said my name and her chin went, and she said, "I've been in therapy since July, 3 months. I'm not here to defend myself. I did terrible things to you, and I called them love, and I realise if you close this door." She'd rehearsed it. I could hear the rehearsal in it. And I want to be fair, you'd rehearsed too, on that long drive in from Neighbourville. Then she said the thing she'd actually come to say. "Thanksgiving is in 6 weeks. Come home. Not for me, for Avery, for your dad. I've become different. I'm asking for the chance to prove it." Standing there in my scrubs, I did the thing I do at work when a patient tells me their pain is too while their hands shake. I read her tears, real ones, but tears had always been real with her. That was never the question. The question was the oldest one in my family, and I heard it in my own head with terrible clarity. "How do you tell a become different woman from a woman playing one?" I said, "I'll think about it," and closed the door gently and leaned against it, shaking. Through the gap in the curtains, I watched her sit in her parked car for 10 full minutes. She never once picked up her phone. 2 years ago, she'd have filmed the doorstep. I had no idea what to do with that. I brought it to Carol that Thursday, like a splinter I couldn't reach. Do I owe her a chance? Carol did her infuriating therapist thing and handed the question back. "What would proof even look like to you?" I opened my mouth to say nothing would and found that wasn't true and sat with that discovery like a stranger on my own couch. Nate weighed in too gently over dishes. "You keep guarding a door, Meg, and calling it a life." I snapped at him, actually snapped, and then stood there in the kitchen listening to the echo of it, because he wasn't wrong and we both knew it. The wall I'd built to keep my mother out had kept everybody out. He'd proposed to a museum after hours, and there was Avery, 17, 1 year from aging out of that house, whispering to me from closets. If I shut this door on my mother, I shut the only door that still opened into my sister's life. Whatever my mother deserved, Avery deserved a witness inside the walls. So, here is where I landed, and I'll stand by the logic to anyone. I would not trust words, hers or mine. Words were her instrument. She could play anything on them. I would trust actions, specific ones. Over time, none of them were performable, or the whole thing was over. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a page torn from my nursing notebook, the kind I use for handoff notes, and I wrote 5 lines in block letters. The first 4 I was prepared to say out loud in a diner. The 5th one I folded over because I wasn't writing it for her. I was writing it for myself. We met at a diner off Route 59, neutral ground, vinyl booths, coffee like punishment. She reached across the table when she sat down. I kept my hands around my mug. Then I slid the page across the laminate and watched my mother read the terms in my blocky nurse's handwriting. 1. You never upload Avery or me again. Not photos, not stories, not throwbacks, not vague little updates about your girls ever. 2. You take down everything, all of it. Every video and photo of the 2 of us across every platform, including the hospital upload, including my first period, including 2 decades of what you call your life's work. 3. You see a licensed therapist weekly, a real one, and this never becomes material. No recovery journey series, no documentary of your growth. 4. You apologize to Avery in private, face to face. No script, no followers, and you never mentioned to a single follower that you did it. She read them twice. Her lips moved a little the way they did when she used to memorize sponsor copies. Then she touched the folded 5th line with one finger and looked up. That one's not yours yet, I said. If the first 4 ever get done, you'll hear it. She asked in a small voice how long this would all take. I said if it's real, it can happen with the cameras off. That's the whole test, Mom. That's the only test. Something moved behind her face then, tectonic and slow. She folded the list along my crease and put it in her purse the way you'd pocket evidence against yourself. And she said the strangest thing so silently I nearly missed it. You write lists like my mother never did. I didn't know what that meant yet. I would. Step 1 happened faster than I expected. It was step 2 that broke something open in that yellow house, and not the something I was bracing for. The feed froze that same night. No goodbye upload, no announcement, which itself was a kind of miracle. My mother had never in 2 decades done anything without announcing it. Over the next 3 weeks, the archive started thinning. I'd refresh on my breaks and find another year of our lives gone. Whole seasons of my childhood vanishing in blocks. And I sat in the hospital parking garage one evening, genuinely unable to name what I felt watching her erase her life's work 1 square at a time. Relief? And underneath it, uninvited, a thin sorrow I resented. We started Sunday coffees at the Route 59 diner. Awkward, formal 40-night appointments. She came early, she came without her phone or kept it zipped away. Either way, I never saw it. One Sunday, she sat down with nothing at all in her hands, and I realized I had never in my adult life seen my mother so. But the hospital upload stayed up. Everything around it fell, and that 1 square remained. My grey, unconscious face still earning its little trickle of candle commissions. And when I asked her about it directly, she looked at the table and said, "The platform archive is complicated, honey. I'm working on it." A flag went up in me, small and red. In my job, being complicated usually means there's something I don't want to tell you. I didn't push. I logged it the way I log a temperature that hasn't spiked yet. Then Avery texted me on a Thursday night. "Mom apologized to me last night." No script, she cried ugly. It was real, I think. And then before I could even feel relieved, the phone buzzed again. "But come get me this weekend. There's something in her office you need to see." I picked Avery up Saturday morning for a weekend at my apartment. A thing we could suddenly do now, and the strangeness of that alone should have warned me life was moving too smoothly. In the car, she talked in a rush, like someone finally off airplane mode. The apology had been real, she was sure of it. Their mother had said the sentence, "I did things to you that you'll be untangling for years," which is not a sentence you can get from a script doctor. But Mom's phone had been ringing lately, and the screen always said, "Priya, her manager from the good years." "And Mom takes those calls in the car now," Avery said, looking out the window in the garage with the door down. "You don't take calls in a closed garage unless the house isn't private enough." And our house had never once been private. Before we'd left, Avery had walked me upstairs past the office, ostensibly for a phone charger. The whiteboard by the desk. The old material calendar had been wiped, but wiped fast. The way you wipe something when the doorbell rings. Ghost letters survived in the corner, part of a Word episode, and below it, faint column lines with dates. I stood there telling myself whiteboards get reused, that 2 decades of habit leave 2 decades of ghosts, that a woman who deleted her own empire had earned a little benefit of the doubt. I told myself quite a lot of things that week. Then, Sunday evening on my couch, wrapped in a blanket with cocoa she'd made herself for once, Avery opened her banking app to show me something. And after that, I stopped telling myself anything at all. Here is what 10 years as the face of a family brand had earned my sister according to the account with her name on it. Almost nothing. A few hundred birthday money, babysitting. That was the whole ledger. The college fund my mother had toasted on camera. Your future is safe. Sweetheart Fund invoked in a dozen sponsored uploads. Avery had never seen a statement for it, not once. When she'd asked last spring, she got the voice, the wounded one. We're a family, not a business. Why would you talk to me like a business? Except the money had moved like a business. It had gone into the family LLC, the one that owned the cameras and paid the mortgage on the yellow house, and leased my mother's white Tahoe. Nothing about it was cartoonish theft. Nobody bought a yacht. It was worse in a silent way. My sister's childhood had been poured into the household concrete legally, casually, the way it happened in thousands of houses like ours, which is exactly why our state finally wrote a law about it. I sat there doing the thing I do, which is getting very calm while a machine in my chest starts printing out a plan. My first instinct, I'll admit it, was to handle it myself, the way I handle everything. Silently, alone, museum hours. I actually reached for my own phone to draft the confrontation text. Then I stopped because I am a nurse, and if there is one thing my job has beaten into me, it is that you do not operate on your own family and you do not confront a hemorrhage with a stern conversation. You call the people whose job it is. There was a law now in our state about kids like Avery. Monday morning after 3 hours of sleep, I made 2 phone calls. The first call was to a nonprofit I'd found on that night shift months before, an organization that advocates for kids who grow up in monetized material. The second was to the lawyer they recommended, a woman named Ruth Calloway, 50s, gay bob handshake like a door closing firmly. In her office that Friday, I laid it out the way I give handoff reports. History, timeline, current status, no adjectives. Ruth listened with her pen down, which I've learned is how serious people listen. Then she explained what the new state law could actually do and what it couldn't. Material featuring Avery as a minor monetized meant a percentage belonged to Avery, owed into a trust. Records could be requested. If the family cooperated, no courtroom, just paperwork and a signature. If they didn't, Avery would have stood to pursue it when she turned 18, which was months away, not years. And given that video of her crying at that kitchen island, Ruth said she could also make a call about a welfare check. Gentle, procedural, a knock and a conversation. Then she slid the representation papers across the desk. And I want to tell you exactly what that felt like, because I signed a lot of forms that year, and this one weighed more than all of them together. Signing it meant my mother would get a formal notice with my name attached, not a fight at a dinner table she could cry her way out of. Paper process, the one language in our family that had never once belonged to her. The old daughter, the one who just wanted her mom to love her silently someday, ended at that signature. I signed it anyway, dated it, passed it back. Signing that paper felt like defibrillating my own family. You shock the heart, hoping it starts beating right, knowing you might just be marking the time of death. If a kid you loved was living on camera, would you have signed? Tell me honestly in the comments and subscribe, because the notice reached my mother on a Thursday. On Friday, she asked to meet, and she did not come alone. She brought Aunt Deb, not a lawyer, which told me something. You bring a lawyer to fight the paper. You bring your sister to fight the daughter. We met at the diner, my booth, my terms, and Deb opened before the coffee landed. Lawyers, Megan, against your own mother. She's dying inside. Do you realize that? Family does not do this to family. I let it wash over me. The whole family first. She raised you. Everyone makes mistakes. And I watched my mother instead because my mother was being silent, and silent was new. When Deb paused for breath, Colleen put a hand on her sister's arm and said, "Deb, stop." Then to me, with a look I couldn't file anywhere. "You think I'd fight you on Avery's money?" Either it was the performance of her life or it was bewilderment, real bewilderment, that the money had ever needed protecting from her, with my mother. The terrifying thing was that both could be true in the same sentence. The meeting ended without shouting, which in my family qualifies as a moon landing. And that night, my father called me for the first time in 2 years. His voice had rust on it. He didn't say hello. He said, "I should have unplugged that camera 15 years ago." And then he cried, "My silent electrician father," and said, "Tell me what you need me to do." Proof that people could become different did exist in my family after all, which only made the question about my mother harder, not easier. Before he hung up, he cleared his throat and added one more thing. "Priya's been at the house twice this month. Your mother meets her out in the driveway like she doesn't want the walls to hear." And yet, the proof kept coming. Stubborn as spring. Ruth sent over the trust agreement, the percentages, the accounting of years, expecting the usual months of stalling. My mother's lawyer advised her in writing to slow down and negotiate. She declined the advice. She signed the first full draft, initialed every page, and Ruth called me sounding almost annoyed. "In my career," she said, "the parents who sign this fast are about 1 in 20. I'm obligated to tell you this is going well. Sunday dinners started with small ones, no grand table. My mother cooked a roast and never once photographed it. And if that sounds trivial to you, then you didn't grow up eating cold food under a ring light." She talked about therapy the way beginners do, getting the vocabulary slightly wrong, telling me her therapist said she uses attention like a pain medication, then laughing at the wrong spot. The laugh of a woman reading a diagnosis, not a script. It was clumsy. Clumsy was the most convincing thing I'd ever seen her do. And at one of those dinners, my sister laughed out loud at something Dad said. A big, unflattering honk of a laugh. And I realized I had never heard that laugh at that table before, because that laugh had never been usable footage. I drove home that night dangerously close to something I hadn't felt about my mother since I was 8 years old. And you can call it hope because that's what it was. Then on Wednesday, in the middle of my shift, Ruth called my cell. "Megan," she said, and her voice had a shape I didn't like. "You should sit down. Do you know about Ruth's office the next morning?" She turned her monitor around without a word, which is how serious people deliver bad news. It was a pitch deck, a professional one, the kind wise polish for streaming buyers, and it had surfaced during her routine requests into the channel's business records for the trust accounting. The title page read, "Bright Side, The Road Home." Subtitle, "A Mother's Redemption, One Daughter at a Time," and under that, in elegant italics, a tagline someone had chosen with care. People need to see this. My mother's phrase, the one from the foot of my hospital bed, dressed up in a serif font and pitched as a brand promise. Ruth scrolled. Episode 1 was outlined on the 4th slide. It was called The Doorstep. There were bullet points. C arrives unannounced. No glam, authentic. M refuses initially. Authentic tension. Reconciliation arc across 6 episodes, culminating in a family Thanksgiving special. Sponsorship categories attached. Wellness, home goods, therapy apps, therapy apps. I read it twice and my whole body went into work mode. Cold hands, flat voice, vitals only. Then I saw the date in the file properties, and the date was the thing. The deck was created 6 weeks before my doorbell rang, before the cardigan with the pale elbows, before she sat in her car not filming, while I stood behind my curtain, being carefully, scientifically moved by it. My test, my diner, my list in block letters, all of it mapped onto somebody's season arc, like they'd written my part before I played it. I sat in my car in Ruth's parking garage for a long time, hands at 10 and 2 going nowhere. Everything I had audited and verified and dared to half believe for 6 weeks reorganized itself into episodes. Except one detail didn't fit, and it snagged on me like a hangale. The deck was 6 weeks old, and according to the paperwork attached to it, my mother still hadn't signed it. I drove to Neatville with the deck printed out because some conversations should not happen on screens. She was alone in the kitchen when I walked in, and I put the pages on the counter between us, titled up, and asked one question, level as a bubble in glass. "Which episode is this, Mom?" She read the cover and aged in front of me. Then, credit where it's due. She didn't perform a shock. She sat down and told it straight, or straight enough. After the collapse, Priya had come to her with the deal like a life raft. The money would cover the refinanced house. And the way Priya sold it, it was a way to make things right with you girls in public, where they broke us, honey. Those were the words used, and I could hear how good they'd sound to a woman whose every wound had always been treated on stage. She attended the meeting. She let them draft. She swore palms flat on the counter that she never signed, that therapy was real, that the apology to Avery was real, that the doorstep was hers, Megan. They wrote it down after I told Priya I was already going to your door. That's what she claimed. And there it was, the whole impossible arithmetic of my mother. The deck was real, and the tears were real. The redemption was for sale, and the redemption was happening. And I could not tell where the woman ended and the show began. And I finally understood that maybe she couldn't either. I picked up my pages. I said, if it's real, it can happen with the cameras off. And I left before she could see my hands shaking. And I told myself I was done, truly done, that the test was failed, case closed. Then at 2 a.m, my phone rang. Avery whispered from the closet again. Me, don't freak out, she said, which is how every conversation that deserves freaking out begins. I heard Mom and Dad in the kitchen. If she doesn't take the deal, they lose the house. The refinance from the good years, the payment scaled to an income that doesn't exist anymore, and me, the trust she signed, the money she owes me. The deal is how she pays it. It covers everything. My college, the R's, all of it. There was a pause, and then my little sister said the sentence I'd been running from for 2 months. So maybe I should just do it. 1 season. I'm 17. I've been on camera my whole life. What's 1 more season? I can survive 1 more season. I stood in my dark kitchen listening to my sister volunteer, to feed herself back into the machine, to buy back money that had always been hers. And I heard it. The sound I'd been listening to for my whole adult life without knowing it. The sound of the wheel coming all the way around. That's what the machine does. It doesn't need to chase you. It just waits for the moment your family needs the money, and it lets love do the recruiting. And I heard something else silenter underneath. Surviving instead of living. Avery's plan, my plan, the family plan. The only plan we'd ever had. Telling her no would be easy and useless. She didn't need my no. She needed a reason to say her own. And there was exactly 1 card left in my hand heavy enough to be that reason. The 5th line on my list, the one I'd folded over at the diner, was written not for my mother, but for me, because it was the only thing I owned that she had never gotten. But first, I drove to Aunt Deb's because before I played that card, I needed to realise the woman across the table. And Deb, for all her family first sermons, is the keeper of the family matter. I asked 1 question. What was Mom like as a kid? Deb went silent for the first time in living memory, then came back downstairs with a shoebox. Inside were maybe a dozen photographs covering my mother's entire childhood. A dozen. Downstate Illinois, a farmhouse that leaned, a mother, my grandmother, whom I'd met twice and remembered mostly as a smell of menthol and a closed door. Grandma drank, Deb said simply. Girls were to be useful, not seen. Nobody in that house owned a camera worth the film, and then she handed me the 1 photo that mattered. My mother, 9 years old, at the county fair, holding a ribbon for a pie she'd baked herself, beaming so hard it hurt to look at. The smile of a child being seen for the very first time. Your grandma didn't come, Deb said. A stranger took that picture and mailed it to the house. Colleen slept with it under her pillow for years. I sat in my car outside Deb's for a long time with that photo in my head. It didn't excuse 1 caption, not 1, but it explained the engine. For my mother, a camera had never been the thing that stole love. A camera was the only witness love had ever sent her. She hadn't been selling her daughters in her mind. She'd been giving us the 1 proof of existence anyone had ever given her at volume forever. You can realize a person completely and still refuse to live inside their wound. Saturday was the dinner where Priya would bring the contract where the whole thing would be decided. I drove out to Neatville as the light was going, parked behind Priya's white SUV, and saw a warm round glow through the front window, the exact color of my childhood. Somebody had set up a ring light in the den. Inside the house had been staged the way I remembered holidays, too warm, too perfect, a roast resting under foil, and my mother moving through it all with the bright, brittle energy of opening night. Priya rose to shake my hand, elegant, friendly, a leather folder under her arm like a hymnal. And in the den, angled toward the good couch, stood a camera on a tripod and the ring light, glowing its soft orange ring, the color every one of my childhood Christmases had been based in. Just to capture a little B-roll, Priya said, following my eyes. Nothing airs without everyone's approval. It's all in the paperwork. My mother did not look at the camera. She looked at me and her eyes were a flare going up over open water. She knew exactly how this looked. She had also not unplugged it. My father stood halfway out of his chair and then sat back down. 40 years of muscle memory. Avery at the end of the table caught my eye and gave me the old signal from reshoot days. The tiny jaw clench that meant, get me out of this scene. Pryor laid it out over dinner. Smooth as lotion, 6 episodes. The trust funded in full. The heirs Avery's college. The house payments caught up. And then she turned to me and said the cleverest thing anyone had said in that house in 30 years. Honestly, Megan, the public deserves your side. You've been the villain in this story for 2 years. Thousands of strangers calling you the daughter who abandoned her grieving mother. Episode 1 fixes that. The record gets corrected on camera forever, and here is the ugly truth. The thing I would only ever admit in a story like this one. For about 10 seconds, I wanted it. I saw the comments turning. I saw the sympathy card senders apologizing. I saw 2 years of being the family monster refunded in full. And God help me, I wanted it. Then I looked at the ring light, that warm halo pointed at the couch where the reconciliation was scheduled to occur. And I felt the 10 seconds end. I stood up. I walked past the roast into the den, and I turned away from the lens. Then I bent down, followed the cord to the outlet, and unplugged the ring light at the wall, and the den went the honest color of a November evening. Nobody breathed. I turned to Priya first because business should be dispatched before blood. Avery's trust doesn't depend on your show. I said it's signed. The claim is filed. However tonight ends, that part is already done. Whatever this family decides, it will not be because a teenager's college was held hostage to a season order. Priya opened the folder anyway, professional to the last, and I looked at my mother and played the only card I had left. Mom, the 5th line on the list. You've earned the right to hear it. I unfolded the paper and set it in front of her, and she read it out loud. Barely. 1 hour, just us cameras off, and I'll let you see me. I watched her not realize it and then begin to you and me at that kitchen table. I said tonight, no cameras, no witnesses, no story you will ever be allowed to tell. The one thing in this world you can't monetize, Mom. Something only you get to know. And when the hour's over, if you still want to sign that contract, sign it, and I'll walk out of this family for the last time, and take Avery's future with me because it's already safe. But if you mean one word of the last 2 months, then this is the moment it happens with the cameras off. Because if it's real, it can happen with the cameras off. So can this. Dad took Priya to the porch. Avery went upstairs. And in that kitchen, under the hum of the hood vent, I gave my mother the only thing she had never gotten from me. The thing I had never given anyone whole, not Carol, not even Nate. I told her about the 11 weeks, the name I'd picked and never said out loud. June. The nurse's eyes that told me before her mouth did, and the 200 notifications that told the world before anyone told me, and what it does to a woman to learn that her sorrow had a discount code before it had a name. I let my mother watch me come apart at her kitchen table with no lens to perform for and no wall left to hide behind. I let her see me. It cost me everything I had, and I would bill it the same way again. When I finished, my mother sat across from me, wrecked in a way I had never once seen her. No angles, no light, mascara-less and swollen and old. Snorts, and she asked the question her whole life had been built on, in a voice I recognized from a county fair photo, a 9-year-old's voice. But if no one sees it, she said, if I become different and no one ever sees it, who's going to know? And I said, I will. The hood vent hummed. The ice shifted in a glass. It was the longest silence our family has ever produced, and I have sat with families in hospital hallways, so I know long silences professionally. Then my mother told me about the ribbon, the pie, the stranger with the camera, the picture under the pillow. And I didn't say Deb had beaten her to it because confession only counts if you carry it to the table yourself. I know, I said anyway, at the end. And I need you to want the version of us where only we clap. She sat with that. Then she got up. walked out to the porch, and handed Priya the leather folder unsigned. "Tell them no," she said, "all of it. The show, the special, the comeback." Priya, to her credit, didn't waste breath persuading. "The market doesn't beg, it replaces." "You'll be replaced by Friday, Colleen," she said, not unkindly, gathering her coat. "Somebody always says yes. That's the machine I could never beat, by the way. And I want you to hear that I know it. It did not die on that porch. It just moved to another family's driveway. But it moved without me. That week, the hospital upload finally came down. Then the rest, 2 decades of it, the whole archive switched to private in one long evening. My mother's hand shaking on the trackpad. Avery sitting beside her, clicking through the confirmations. The two of them are deleting a monument together. And the trust paperwork cleared through Ruth's office. Avery's share in Avery's name is untouchable until she's 18, which is to say soon. Let me itemize the bill because catharsis without a receipt is just a fantasy. The yellow house went up for sale in November. My mother listed it herself. It turns out when you stop performing a life, you can afford a smaller one, and there is more dignity in that sentence than in anything she ever uploaded. The internet wrote its own ending, as it does. A creator forum decided the controlling daughter forced her poor mother offline, and that version of me is still out there, permanent, unreadable, wearing my name. I never corrected it. Correcting it would have cost the only thing I'd actually won, and my silence was the last line of the test, the one I'd written for myself. I would never make my mother into material, not even to win. Some cousins still don't speak to me. Aunt Deb sends birthday cards with a little too much scripture in them. That's the tax, and I pay it annually. On my side of the ledger, I told Nate everything, the name, June, all of it. 2 years late and exactly on time. And then I asked him if the ring was still available. It was. And my mother, to be clear, is not finished. Because becoming different is not a place you arrive. It's a verb with no tense but present. At Avery's birthday, she picked up her phone out of pure reflection when the cake came out, caught herself, and set it face down on the counter like a smoker, crushing a pack, and looked at me across the candles, the way a student looks at a teacher. Progress in my family is measured in things that don't get uploaded. Thanksgiving came back to us that year, 2 years later and smaller. Nobody filmed it. Thanksgiving was at the rental, a little brick 2-bedroom with a kitchen you couldn't turn around in. And it was, start to finish, the best holiday of my life. The turkey was dry. My father told a story about a junction box that had no ending, and we let him land it anyway. Avery got her early acceptance letter that week and read it to us off paper because she printed it on purpose for the table. Not one phone stood upright anywhere. Near the end, my mother handed me a shoebox and my chest tightened because in my family, shoeboxes carry history. Inside were photographs, printed ones. Me at the fair with cotton candy, eyes shut, laughing. Avery asleep on Dad's chest, drooling. My mother caught mid-size at somebody's graduation, gloriously unflattering. Every crooked, blurry, unusable frame from 2 decades of outtakes. The ones that never made the feed because they weren't material. They were just us. On the lid, in her careful teacher's handwriting, she had written for followers of one. I looked up and she was watching me with her hands folded, nervous as a girl at a fair, and I understood what I was holding. It was the negative space of my entire childhood. Everything that had been real the whole time, printed at a drugstore, and given to the only person who was ever supposed to see it. Avery starts college in the fall. The trust unlocks on her birthday, her name, her signature, her call. She's writing her application essays about growing up online, her version in her words. And the first time she let me read one, I cried in a parking lot because the girl can write. And because for the first time in our family's history, the person telling the story is the person who lived it. The machine, I'm sorry to report, is fine. Some other family is trending this week. Some other 6-year-old with a camera in her face, and no list of mine can reach her. I couldn't fix the internet. I fixed a kitchen table. My mother has my phone number and my Sunday afternoons. She does not have my photograph, and she has stopped asking. That's not coldness, that's the deal. Renewed each season like anything living. Forgiveness, it turns out, isn't a gate you swing open. It's a contract you keep signing, both of you, in a kitchen with the cameras off for as long as it keeps being true. Here is what I know now. Love that has to be seen to be real was never love. It was applause, and the difference is simple. Only one of them still holds you when every light in the house is off. That's my story. One hospital photo, one handwritten list, one ring light unplugged for good. If someone in your life keeps performing and becomes different instead of living it, maybe it's time to ask them for 1 hour with the cameras off. And if this story feels familiar, share it with someone who needs it today. Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.